Trump's latest AI meme. You know, the one when he's flying the jet and drops a bunch of poop all over the protesters at the No Kings protest. I wanted to touch on that because obviously the left is very upset by it. So there's this debate on whether it's presidential or not for the president of the United States to be making a meme such as that. And there's also an argument to be had on whether or not that's inflammatory or divisive. And me being conservative, a lot of people expect me to just kind of sit in my bubble and cheer on everything conservatives do, including our president. But I'm here to tell you that although I did think it was funny, I have to be honest. Does it help the problem in the United States? Not really, right? If you're trying to unite the people, it's probably not the best way to do it. Do I think the left are overreacting and making it bigger than it is? Absolutely. But with that said, I do think there's a certain level of decorum that comes with being the president. And I'm probably going to get a lot of heat from fellow conservatives about this. But it's something I've been thinking about for a couple days now, since the meme came out. First, I saw it. I chuckled. Didn't think much of it. But I looked deeper. I did something that most people in both bubbles, the left and the right bubbles, typically don't do. I paused and I thought, does this help our country? Ultimately, no, it doesn't. But that leads me to the second issue as to why I feel like a meme like that gets so much support and why people turn a blind eye to it. But before I get to that, I want to touch on one more thing involving conservatives and the right. I think we have a problem. The problem is that I'm seeing currently is we're not holding our own accountable like we want the left to hold their own accountable. I mean, we were, and in most cases we do, but we're starting to lose track of that. And let me explain what I mean. We all know those text messages, right, that came out recently, racist, people praising Hitler. These were young Republicans, so-called young Republicans, right? And I've already seen maybe 3 different interview cases, and I'm not going to mention names right now, of prominent Republicans who had a very hard time condemning those messages. Here's my advice to any conservative that has a hard time condemning terrible messages. Condemn them. Ultimately, I believe that you do not agree with those stances, but by playing this tug-of-war game of whether you condemn them or not, or what about you, and I think we need to take the moral high ground here and just, condemn them outright and then continue the arguments that actually matter. Now, with that said, there's a reason why conservatives have been so apprehensive to condemning those text messages or the president for certain instances. And it's clear as day, and I'll explain to you why. And when I say this, I already know a lot of the left is not going to like what I have to say. But it's the truth. And honestly, it has to be said, and it has to be acknowledged by both sides. The left has a problem condemning and holding their own accountable for the things that they say and do on their side of the fence. And they've done it for such a long time at this point. Why would they hold their own accountable when you don't hold your own accountable is essentially the argument. You see where I'm going with this? When you have prominent politicians on the left calling Trump Hitler, calling conservatives fascists and Nazis, why is John Fetterman the only Democrat that I can think of that has actually said that's not okay, stop doing that? But yet all of them do it. From AOC to Hillary Clinton to Kamala Harris to Ilhan Omar to Schumer. I mean, the list goes on. And then you have what happened with Charlie Kirk and the lack of condemnation from the left to the people who celebrated such. You know, that's not to say that some of them didn't condemn it, but as a whole, as a unit, as a party, pretty much silent. And then we have their own leaked text message situation with Jay Jones, the attorney general candidate in Virginia whose text messages got leaked. He advocated for killing conservative opponents and their children, calling them little fascists. No condemnation. He didn't lose a single endorsement. He wasn't condemned, and in fact, encouraged to keep running because they believed he was the best candidate. So do you see where I'm going with this? One side refuses to condemn anybody on their end for anything, and then you get mad when the conservatives do the same thing. You have no leverage. You would have had leverage had you actually done the right thing the first time, condemned your own, held them accountable, and then when the conservatives had the opportunity to play the same game, you could have told them, we did the right thing. We condemned our own. Now you do the same. Do you see the problem here? And there's a lot more than just that. There's these protests, the No Kings protests or the anti-ICE protests, where there's signs and piñatas of Donald Trump getting beat up or stabbed, signs saying, make assassinations great again. Every good Nazi's a dead Nazi, with a picture of someone with a MAGA hat on. I mean, the list goes on, and no one is condemning it from that side. No one prominent. None of the political leaders on the left. So when I see conservatives refusing to condemn similar situations, I understand why. And that's not to say they're right. I still think conservatives should 100% condemn their own side, hold their own side accountable when they step out of line. That's what I think. Now, in other news, there's this big ruckus over the White House renovation. Well, I did some research, and apparently the White House has been renovated 5+ times. And in this particular instance, taxpayer dollars aren't being used to renovate it. And it's only renovating one section. I believe it is the East Wing. Correct me if I'm wrong. So a bunch of donors and Trump himself put his own money into these renovations. So I don't quite understand the drama behind this. I think in this case, I think Democrats are just looking for something to be mad at. And it's unbecoming. It doesn't do your party any favors. It makes them look bad. There's so many more important things I feel like the Democrat Party should be focusing on. But for some reason, the White House renovation is the problem. I don't really. Come on, guys. And then there's this whole situation with striking the cartel boats off the coast of Venezuela. There's a lot of debate there on whether or not these people deserve due process, or if we're even striking actual cartel members. How do we know that there's drugs on the boat? All these things. And this is just my opinion on this particular topic. They have been designated as narco-terrorists. And as long as I can remember, once you're designated as a terrorist organization, you typically get drone striked into oblivion. And that was what was happening in Afghanistan for about 15, 20 years. And nobody seemed to really care. So, it is a question for me, like, why all of a sudden is this a big deal? And I can't help but wonder if maybe it's just because Trump's the one doing it. Like, if it was Obama or Biden, would anybody care? I don't know. But that's a question I pose to you. Because as far as we know, based on the evidence that has been released to the public, these boats were indeed carrying tons of narcotics in the direction of our country. They knew who these people were based on their intel that they received from espionage on the ground, satellite data, and other sources that I have no idea. But I'm one that I like to trust my government until they give me a reason not to trust them. I was the same way during January 6th. When January 6th first happened, that was around the time I became a conservative. That was the last time I was a Democrat. Because around that time, I trusted my government, and I believed what they were telling me, that this was an insurrection. They were trying to overthrow the Capitol and all this stuff. But as the years went by, more evidence came out to the contrary. So now there's a lot more complexity to that entire situation, which has all of us questioning whether or not it was what they said it was. Once that information started to kind of come out in the years following, around 2021, 2022, I mean, that's when I just became a conservative, because At that point, I had reason not to trust my government. So in this instance, when it comes to the cartel boats, I would say the same thing. Trust our government that they're doing their due diligence and that they're striking actual cartel members that are trying to bring deadly narcotics into our country. We're basically stopping it before it becomes a problem on the ground here. But again, I'd like to know what you guys think about all these topics I just talked about. But before we're done here, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on, and it's labels. You know, I started this video out talking about Trump's meme when he flies the jet and he drops poop all over the protesters and whether or not that was productive for the country, you know, a pro or a con. And ultimately, I think it was a con. Why? Because it was essentially divisive. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, labeling an entire group of people is also divisive. Labeling the entire conservative party as Nazis or fascists is bad. The conservative party labeling the left or Democrats as insane or loonies is bad. The left labeling white people as the problem and then acting like you can't be racist towards white people, that's not good. And then we have all the labels in between. And a lot of these labels have no merit. And not only that, but when you put an entire group of people into a box, what do you think is going to happen? Those group of people become more tribal because they feel like they have nowhere else to go than to stay in the box that you put them in because that's the only place they can feel safe. So by you pushing labels like this, you're actually creating more of a divide. At some point, somebody has to stand up on either side, both sides preferably, and say, hey, enough's enough. And right now, when it comes to the Democrats, I think Fetterman's that guy. Fetterman's one of the only Democrats on that side who, in my mind, has a good head on his shoulders. He cares more about his country than he does about the bickering in Congress. He cares more about the country and the people than he hates Trump, if he even hates Trump. But a lot of people on the left seem to hate Trump so much that they're willing to throw the country down the toilet just to spite him. And if that keeps happening, you're not going to get the results you think. What you're going to do is you're going to turn the conservative party into the monster you've been labeling them as. I don't think any of us want that to happen. So I know there's a lot here in this video I just talked about, and it's just me just kind of yapping. But I only made this video so we can think about what I said here, talk about it in the comments, because I am one of those conservatives who will critique both sides across the board. If there's something that Trump does I sincerely disagree with, I'm going to call it out. And if there's something on the left, I'm going to call it out. So with that said, comment below. Let me know what you think. Follow me at twitch.tv/noillusions if you want to catch me live, 9 a.m. Central on weekdays. And let's have a conversation live one of these days. All right, y'all. You have a good evening.